welcome. You're here because you want to, get past the headlines.
Yeah, you want those aha moments.
Exactly, to really understand complex stuff without getting overwhelmed.
And today, we're diving into something pretty heavy. The world of disturbing crimes.
We're going to try and explore what's going on beneath the surface. Motivations, reactions, the whole justice process.
And we've pulled from, well, all sorts of places to do this. YouTube discussions, interviews with killers, news articles like one about bodies found in New England.
We've also got psychology perspectives on things like remorse, psychopathy, FBI insights too.
Right, and legal reviews like from the Fordham Law Review on victim impact. Plus local news coverage, even Reddit threads.
So the mission here is to pull out the key ideas, understand the criminals, the impact, the justice system, all that.
But trying to stay objective, obviously. It's sensitive stuff.
Definitely. Okay, so where do we start? Maybe with the people involved. Their reactions, motivations.
That feels like the right place, because the range of reactions you see is, well, it's pretty stark sometimes.
It really is. I mean, you look at the sentencing for Willard Noble Chaden Miller, a teenager getting life.
And the footage just shows nothing. Like blankness.
Yeah, almost unfazed. It's deeply unsettling. But then in the same source material, you see Rachel Schaefer.
Also young, also involved in a death, but she actually expresses remorse.
That contrast right there. Indifference versus sorrow. It really makes you ask, what's going on inside? How can two reactions be so different?
It's the complexity of it all, isn't it? And then you have cases like TJ Lane, the school shooter.
Ah, yes. The KK County Maple Leaf covered that.
And the prosecutor pointed out there was no clear motive. Not really.
It wasn't impulsive. It was planned. Meticulously.
Staring at victims for 8 minutes. 8 minutes. Then aiming for their head.
Chilling. And the families, their statements about his lack of remorse, the trauma, it just lasts.
You really have to wonder about that kind of premeditation without, a typical trigger. Was it about feeling powerful or something else?
It's hard to fathom. And we also see weird dynamics in family murder cases.
Like Eric in the Beyond Crime series.
Exactly. DNA evidence, proof of financial fraud against his own parents.
And he still denied it. Maintained his innocence.
Total denial. How does that even work? Is it like a psychological shield? A complete break?
Well, that kind of connects to what the FBI Bulletin and Psychology Today say about psychopathy.
Right, the characteristics.
Yeah, that cool indifference, no regret, maybe sense of power, being manipulative, lying.
Pathological lying, yeah. And just no empathy.
It's like a whole cluster of traits. And it helps explain some of these really extreme reactions or the lack of reaction we see.
The FBI Bulletin had that example, James Roscoe. High score on the psychopathy checklist.
And his violence against police wasn't just rage, it was
instrumental, planned, calculated to get what he wanted, like revenge.
Yeah, not emotional, more like a strategic move. That difference between reactive and instrumental violence is pretty important for understanding certain offenders.
Absolutely. And that video titled 10 Disturbing Interviews with Killers?
Right, we don't have the transcripts, but the title alone tells you there's a whole spectrum.
Some might try to show remorse. Maybe genuinely, maybe not.
Yeah.
Others have that coldness we're talking about.
That psychopathic indifference, it really makes you question what remorse even is.
It does. And then you've got someone totally different, like Jean-Claude Romand.
Oh, the guy who faked his whole life, pretended to be a doctor.
For decades. The violence only came when his lies were about to unravel.
So his motivation wasn't initially violence, but deception, protecting this massive lie.
Shows how varied these drives can be, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's about preserving a fantasy. Okay, let's maybe shift focus a bit. Let's talk about time. Cold cases.
Yeah. The Explore with U.S. video really highlights that, how time impacts families, justice, everything.
These cases show that just because it's unsolved now doesn't mean it stays that way forever.
Definitely not. Look at Christine Jessup's case. So tragic.
Kidnapped, murdered, and then Guy Palmarin wrongly convicted. His life ruined.
And it took decades, right, and genetic genealogy.
To finally identify Calvin Hoover. And the really disturbing part, Hoover knew the family.
He was at the searches, the funeral.
Yeah, a supposed friend. But the father didn't even really remember him specifically.
Oh, wow. Danger hiding in plain sight. And the early investigation mistakes had huge consequences.
And Hoover died before he could face trial. So no real sense of complete justice there.
You see that waiting, that agony in Carly-Ann Walker's case, too. Her brother talked about it.
46 years. Just imagine. Waiting 46 years for answers after her death.
And again, it was DNA, finally leading to Glenn McCurley's arrest. That long wait just adds to the trauma for the families.
And Fawn Marie Mountain. Another layer entirely.
The first investigation went nowhere. Then, years later, DNA points to her own cousin, Donald Cox Jr.
But he'd already died.
So the family had to decide, do we release his name for truth, even without a prosecution? It shows how families find different paths to, well, maybe not closure, but some kind of resolution.
Right, and Peggy Hetrick's case. 25 years. Assumptions. A false confession.
Just muddied the waters, like you said, until DNA pointed to Christopher Whited.
And even then, the motive. Still unclear.
All these cold cases, they really bring home how many unsolved homicides are out there. And like the Office of Justice Programs mentions, the potential link to serial killers.
Though it's hard to actually count them. Or their victims.
But these stories remind us time doesn't heal all wounds, and the search for answers can take generations.
It's really sobering. Okay, so let's turn to the impact. The victims, their families, and how the system tries to respond.
Victim impact statements are huge here. We see that in the Fordham Law Review and even the Reddit discussion.
They give victims a voice, right?
Yeah.
A chance to say how the crime really affected them, especially its sentencing.
Absolutely. And Dina's words, T.J. Lane sentencing. You can feel the power there.
Years after her son Danny was killed, her pain was still so raw. And her conviction that Lane felt no remorse.
She called him a child killer, just laid bare the suffering he caused. It puts a human face on it all.
And Crystal, talking about her brother Russell, another victim in that shooting.
So moving. That story about his organ donation saving lives, even children's lives.
In the middle of such horror, this act of selflessness, it's a powerful contrast to the violence.
It really brings that human element right into the courtroom.
But that Fordham Law Review article brings up a tricky legal point. What about victim impact statements if the defendant is dead? Like with Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, that's complex. Legally, if the indictment is dismissed because of death, it's like they were never convicted.
But the judge allowed Epstein's accusers to speak, to give these really emotional testimonies.
So there's this tension. Giving victims a voice versus the established legal rules? Is it about public accountability, even without a conviction?
Or maybe, as the article suggests, a kind of court-sanctioned shaming without a guilty verdict.
Exactly. It's a real debate about the purpose of those proceedings when there's no conviction possible. Is it for the victims? Does it risk undermining due process?
And flipping it around, that Federal Bar Association piece talks about how defendants can show remorse.
From the defense perspective, yeah. Get a job, pay restitution, concrete actions.
But it warns them, too, don't try to look like the victim yourself. That backfires completely.
It's a fine line to walk, and sometimes, as the Reddit threads mention, defendants do react to victim statements.
Even though it's not supposed to happen.
Yeah, especially if they feel like, what have I got to lose now? It just shows how raw and unpredictable courtrooms can be.
Definitely highlights the human drama within the system.
Yeah.
Okay, let's shift to something that causes a lot of public anxiety, serial killers.
Right. That Fox News report about New England, multiple bodies found in a short span.
Understandably, that sparks fear. 12 bodies. Taunton, Norwalk, Springfield, Plymouth. All within 3 months.
It looks like a pattern, doesn't it? Communities get worried.
And you saw that worry reflected online, that Reddit thread, New England serial killer.
People immediately start bringing up history, like the Connecticut River Valley killer, or theories like the smiley face murders, even if that one's debated.
It shows how these discoveries tap into existing fears about, serial violence.
There was even that personal story on Reddit. Someone in Rhode Island had a creepy encounter in a parking lot.
It makes those broader fears feel very personal, very immediate.
And someone mentioned seeing a white pickup truck in the area. Even unconfirmed details like that add to the unease.
Of course. And we know it's not just fiction. The Office of Justice Programs points to the FBI's Highway Serial Killings Initiative. Serial killers operating across state lines, it's a real thing.
So while law enforcement in that Fox News piece said there were no confirmed links between those specific bodies,
You can understand why people are apprehensive, given the history.
it really does make you think about that balance, right? Staying aware versus spreading fear without proof. How do we process news like that responsibly?
Good question. So, bringing this deep dive toward a close, what have we really pulled out?
Well, we've seen this huge range of motivations and reactions in disturbing crimes, from apparent indifference to remorse, and sometimes just baffling mystery.
We looked at cold cases, how time affects families in the chase for justice. Technology helps, sure, but the emotional toll is immense.
And victim impact statements, their power in court, giving voice to the human cost, but also the complex legal questions, especially when a defendant dies.
Right, and then finally, those anxieties about serial violence, how real events can trigger widespread fear, tapping into historical cases and ongoing investigations.
So it leaves you thinking, doesn't it?
Definitely. Like, what does remorse actually look like? Can we ever really know?
And how does time change our pursuit of justice? What do we owe the victims of unsolved cases?
And how do we, as people, as communities, balance being careful with not giving in to overwhelming fear?
It's complex. This dive shows the human capacity for terrible harm, but also for incredible resilience.
Yeah. Our understanding of crime, of justice, it's always evolving. Still so many questions. Lots to keep reflecting on.